Welcome to the New Thinking for a New World podcast, where we explore the most pressing issues that are challenging and changing our societies. We are looking for new thinking and new solutions wherever we can find them. Listen as host Alan Stoga, the Talberg Foundation's chairman, challenges his guests for analysis, ideas and actions. Together, we can help make our world at least a bit better.
More than 4.6 million people, 90% women and children, have fled the war in Ukraine since the Russians invaded on February 24th. At least another 7 million people have been internally displaced within the country. That is already the largest movement of refugees in Europe since World War II. The number of refugees and of those internally displaced, but far more tragically of civilians killed and wounded, is rising rapidly as President Putin's strategy of war on cities and on the people who live in them intensifies. The result is that refugees are pouring into neighboring countries. Most are going to Poland, where at least 2.7 million people had arrived by April 11th, according to the Polish border guard. Another 1.5 million almost have gone to other Eastern European members of the EU. Those numbers are almost incomprehensible in human terms. Again, they are mostly women and children. They must be terrified and are probably arriving with almost no clothes or food or medicine or cash. How are they received? How are they protected? Since almost every humanitarian crisis attracts vultures, who protects the vulnerable? Do they expect to return to a post-war Ukraine, or do they hope their husbands, fathers, and brothers might eventually join them in Europe? And what are Poles, as well as Romanians, Hungarians, and others thinking as these refugees pour into their countries? As always, there are more questions than answers, but this episode of New Thinking for a New World is more about bearing witness and understanding than it is about imagining solutions. My guest is Marta Górczyńska, a Polish human rights lawyer who has been deeply engaged in the crisis at the Belarus-Polish border, as well as working more generally with Ukrainian refugees. Welcome, Marta. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. Thank you for having me here.
Let me start with the background. What is the reality on the border? First on the Polish-Ukraine border, and then on the Polish-Belarus border.
Well, the last year was very challenging for Poland in terms of receiving refugees. First, it started with the Polish-Belarusian border. As probably most of you know, there is the still ongoing humanitarian crisis at the Belarusian border with a lot of migrants, asylum seekers fleeing from countries in Middle East and in Africa, arriving to Belarus and then trying to enter EU via Polish external borders. And since the very beginning of the crisis, Polish government implemented the pushback policy, pushing most of the people back to Belarus and not allowing them to access the asylum proceedings. It raises a lot of human rights concerns, obviously. A lot of people, a lot of activists, a lot of local residents living near the border with Belarus are engaging in providing humanitarian assistance to those stranded in the forest between Poland and Belarus. And now, for the last 2 months, we also have refugees fleeing Ukraine. It's another border affected by the crisis, but it's handled in very different way. We offer a very warm welcome to refugees fleeing Ukraine, with the government providing necessary assistance, with a lot of volunteers, NGOs, private people going to the border and legally providing assistance to those fleeing war. And I'm highlighting here this word legally because on the Belarusian border, providing humanitarian assistance is considered illegal. And more and more activists are now facing criminal charges for what they're doing at this border.
So I'll ask the obvious question. What is the difference? Or rather, why is the difference?
Well, this would be the question to the government, obviously. I don't know this answer. I guess it's political. Poland for the last year was a country that was not very welcoming for refugees in general. But as we see right now, it was mostly towards refugees fleeing Middle East or African countries. But when it comes to people fleeing Ukraine, we call them brothers, we call them our friends, and we offer them shelter, which is a very good thing to do. And obviously it is a right thing to do. But it also shows that there are different standards regarding people seeking for protection in Poland, and it depends on their nationality, on the country from which they flee.
You're a lawyer. Let me ask a legal question. Clearly, the government is treating people differently. The EU is treating refugees differently. What is the legal status of the refugees coming from Ukraine in Poland, in Europe?
There was a new law passed last month allowing people fleeing Ukraine to legally reside in Poland for 18 months. It can be further prolonged, and offering them special treatment, social benefits, access to healthcare, access to education, access to labor market, which obviously allows those people fleeing Ukraine to start a new life in Poland with, at least temporary stay here until they can go back home and have a pretty decent life in terms of having access to almost all let's say social benefits as Polish people do. Also, the EU introduced new measures concerning people fleeing Ukraine, allowing them to travel within the EU, to look for the country in which they want to reside after fleeing Ukraine, which also give them an opportunity to join their families if they have family members living in other EU states. And this is something that obviously is something unprecedented. We haven't seen this before. You maybe remember that in 2015, when the EU was challenged with a lot of people fleeing countries like Syria or Afghanistan and seeking shelter in Europe, there was also a discussion to introduce some kind of a temporary measure to offer those people some protection. And it was never done. There was never an agreement reached by the EU member states to offer any kind of a special treatment for those. While here, with the Ukrainian crisis, with the influx of Ukrainian refugees seeking shelter in EU, it was very quick for the EU to decide that we need some special measures. And once again, it's a very good thing, and obviously it really helps people who had to flee their homes. But it also shows that we can treat people differently in a human way, and maybe we should also implement the same standards, the same kind of protection to all other people fleeing wars, fleeing persecutions, coming from different regions and parts of the world, and arriving in Europe.
I want to come back to that in a second, but let me just finish with one legal technicality. Does either the Polish law or the new EU directives apply to people still in Ukraine? For example, since most of the refugees are women and children, since men are not allowed to leave Ukraine if you're of fighting age, do the families that have left have any right to bring people eventually? So if a husband, if a brother, if a father down the road is allowed to leave Ukraine because the situation evolves however it does, could they come into Poland? Could they come into the EU?
Well, obviously they can. Right now, Poland is allowing every person who flees Ukraine entry without any additional requirements, and this is the same for all other neighboring countries to Ukraine. So it doesn't even have to be, any formal family reunification kind of proceeding. Everybody can enter, and then everybody can benefit from these new regulations, allowing them to stay legally in the EU. Maybe we should mention that, almost everyone, this new law doesn't apply to people who do not have Ukrainian citizenship, which means that it's only for Ukrainian citizens and certain groups of third country nationals, such as people who obtained international protection in Ukraine or had a permanent residence stay there, but only if they cannot safely return to their home countries.
Almost 3 million refugees is approaching 10% of Poland's population. That's a huge number. Poland does not have, I understand, camps where refugees are being put. So that would be a huge burden on the housing situation, a huge burden on the food supply, at a time of inflation, et cetera, et cetera. What's the mood in Poland about the Ukrainian refugees?
I would say that there is a huge enthusiasm, in receiving refugees from Ukraine. People are almost bragging, how many people they are sheltering in their own homes, how many people they were able to help. People are organizing, amazing help, even going to Ukraine with, medicines or with food, and then taking people from Ukraine to Poland, helping them to get here safely. A lot of private companies offered some kind of assistance, like medical companies. They are free train tickets distributed to people fleeing Ukraine. So it's all, amazing when you look at it, obviously. And like I'm saying, there is a lot of enthusiasm, although we are noticing the first signs of exhaustion. People are getting tired of helping because most of the work, especially at the beginning of the crisis, was done by volunteers, ordinary people, NGOs. Like you're saying, we do not have even dedicated reception centers for people fleeing Ukraine. So it was all done by people who offered their own homes for Ukrainians. But it's not a sustainable solution, obviously. And the government, the state has to step in. And I think we're going into the second phase of the crisis where people are already quite tired. And it's very human. I mean, like if you offer your house, for a family of 4 or 5, and after a month or two, you still don't see any signs of the assistance that can be provided by the government, for you to find, something more sustainable for this family, then you start getting tired, and we start noticing that this is happening. So the government right now has to think about providing permanent places of residence, of accommodation for those people, and we still don't see it's happening. And this is the problem that's actually with the lack of preparation. That's first of all. So it seems that the government was not prepared very well for the crisis, for the Russian invasion. Although it was known for quite a while that it might happen, anytime soon, and also. We see that this is also the result of the years of policy with the lack of proper migration policy. Poland, like I've said before, it's not very welcoming towards refugees, and never established a system of integrating them. And now we are seeing the results of that. Now we need to set the system like from the scratch, actually. And that's what I guess the government is right now trying to do. But it's really slow, and we see already problems with housing. That's one thing, but healthcare system, which needs to adjust to a lot of new patients, and especially patients with special needs, such as victims of war traumas, injured people, elder people, sick people, and patients who do not speak Polish. So you need also to provide interpreters for them, and all these additional services. The education system, it's also a challenge. There are a lot of Ukrainian kids right now in Poland, and there is no vision, no vision on how to provide them education in Poland, in their probably native language, because they do not know Polish. If we do not know, if we do not have the integrational assistance and so on. So this is also quite a challenge right now.
Do you know leaders that sound like these? Leaders, young or old, who are changing the world? Who are not content with what is and are willing to work for what could be? If so, nominate them for the Talberg SNF Eliasson Global Leadership Prize at talbergprize.org. That's TALLBERG prize.org.
Do you expect any answers? Do you think answers come? Do they come from Warsaw? Do they come from Brussels?
Well, right now we mostly see some ad hoc solutions. So all these challenges are addressed by NGOs, by local governments, by people who are devoting their spare time to assist Ukrainians in dealing with everyday life here in Poland. But we need some systemic solutions for that. And here, obviously, the EU can be of help. But right now, I don't see a good cooperation between the EU and the Polish government. Maybe when it comes to dealing with Ukrainian refugees, it will be different. But for the last year, there was this quite open conflict between the European Commission and Poland on the rule of law and other issues like the lack of independent judiciary. And obviously, it's not helping right now. It's not helping with finding some solutions for the situation.
Let's go down that rabbit hole. You understate the case that there's been tension between Warsaw and Brussels, to put it mildly, over the last year or two. Suddenly, we're in the middle of this crisis. Poland is behaving very differently as a leader in trying to cope with this migration crisis. It's not going away anytime soon. It's going to have a huge impact on Poland. Does it have a huge impact, do you think, and I'm now asking you to speculate, does it have a huge impact on how Poland is viewed and treated by Brussels? First question. And the corollary is, does this crisis perhaps have a consequence for Poland's migration policy more generally? So let's separate those two things. First is about, does this change the relationship between Poland and the rest of Europe? And then the second is going to be about migration policy.
Yes, I would answer yes to the first question. It seems that the EU is kind of like forgetting all this, well, let me start over what I wanted to say. Yeah, so, okay. Once again, so my answer to your first question is yes. Yes, I think that right now, the rule of law crisis or the lack of the independence of the judiciary, it's not the first issue. Right now, EU is concentrating on the Ukrainian issue, and here Poland is obviously a crucial partner. So naturally, some of these conflicts had to be just taken under the table, and right now the discussion is about something else. There will be some money transferred from the EU to Poland, and you remember that this was also an issue for the last months, whether Poland will receive any funding due to the lack of the respecting of the EU law and the rule of law crisis. So this is something that, this is definitely something that it's changing this situation. And regarding the general migration situation, well, definitely it should change our approach to migration. I mean, we cannot pretend anymore that we're not receiving refugees and that we do not, have migrants in Poland. We have to finally admit that there are so many of them that we have to start, setting up the migration policy, some kind of a vision, what kind of migration policy we would like to have in Poland. Providing additional services for them, like, language courses, or even, cooperating with NGOs which for years have been providing assistance for those and are right now the natural partner for the government to deal with so many refugees from Ukraine. So it has to change, definitely, but at the same time, when I'm looking at the Belarusian border, I'm a bit afraid that, for other refugees in Poland, it might change not in such a good direction. Since the beginning of the Russian invasion on Ukraine, we see that actually the situation at the Belarusian border is only getting worse. And this is because, we suspect that since, Poland is right now receiving so many refugees from Ukraine, and there is and the whole world is admiring Poland for what they're doing here. Nobody, looks anymore at the Belarusian border where we have this, huge human rights violations. And right now we are seeing that that the policy there is more and more cruel. More and more activists are being arrested, are being harassed for what they're doing, and the situation there is only getting worse. So, this is maybe not something optimistic. But that's how I see it right now.
I think you're right. We could well see a hardening of policies towards non-Ukrainian refugees in Europe as this crisis continues and as the refugee flows from the Ukraine continue to increase.
Yeah, we've been actually seeing it for a long time right now, at all European borders. So what's happening at the Polish-Belarusian border, it's not something new, right? The pushbacks, criminalization of humanitarian aid, not respecting the asylum law, not respecting the EU law, and European Union turning the blind eye on these violations.
Which is a scary observation, because if Ukraine tells us anything, it tells us that we're going to see more and more migrations in the future, whether driven by climate or by war or by disease. That's a known, and we're seeing both this very good reaction, but also a very bad reaction.
Yes, absolutely. And, it's obvious that we'll be seeing more and more migration, due to the climate change, wars, inequalities, and so on. And we should be prepared for that. So the question is not if, the question is how, not if we want to receive people. People will be coming anyway. We should have policies and solutions on how to integrate them, how to make it safe for both people arriving and people receiving them. And the example of Ukraine shows us that it is possible, and this is maybe something optimistic. In only the last 6 weeks, we've received almost 3 million people from Ukraine, and nothing happened. I mean, like, there is no collapse of the state, we're pretty fine here. People are doing amazing job. And we're, slowly learning how to improve this process, how to make it even better for people arriving, and also, for people who are offering them shelter here. And I think, when we compare it to the numbers of, let's say this, 20,000 people that were trying to cross the border from Ukraine to Poland, or even, 2015, when, almost or maybe a little bit more than 1 million people, entered the EU in a year, then, it shows that maybe we're exaggerating with our fears, with, our thinking that this is something that it's too much for Europe, that it cannot be done. Well, it can be, and right now the example of Ukraine shows us that it can be done in a safe way.
I can't end without addressing the elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room is obvious. Poland and Ukraine have a relationship that goes back hundreds of years. Poland the borders moved back and forth over time. Ukraine's been part of Poland, et cetera, et cetera. Part of the receptivity is, of course, these people look and act and have a relationship that's old. It's ancient relationship. Yet migrants from the Middle East or from Africa are different. They're racially different. They're religiously different. They are different in many ways. And surely some of the receptivity now is about that.
Well, I would say that some of the challenges are obviously very different, and some of the challenges are very similar. Obviously, it's much easier for Ukrainians because of the language, which is very similar to Polish, because they have most of them have some family members or some relatives already in Poland. But, some of the challenges are still the same. I mean, they still have to, somehow use the healthcare system, find some housing at some point. They might need psychological assistance, and all of this actually doesn't, it doesn't matter from where you are. The challenge here is it's quite the same. So that's what I'm saying, that obviously here it might be slightly easier, but it's not that it's so different, from, any other person coming to Poland from not so close country as Ukraine is. So I'd say that, we can learn from that experience. We can see what works and then implement it also, for other people, because like we said before, the migrations won't stop just because we want them to stop, and because, we will implement hostile policies. People are coming anyway, and the choice, I think, it's only how will we receive it. And if you receive people in a warm way, like you do with Ukrainians, they're grateful, and they can easily integrate into the society and contribute to it. And I think it's the same for all people. And we've seen also these examples from for other people who came not from such a close country as Ukraine is, and it was the same case. We just need to show them compassion and empathy rather than hostility.
Thank you very much for this conversation, as well as for the efforts you're making, and finally for the attitude. You're right, a migrant's a migrant, probably not their choice. And if we treat them with sympathy and empathy, we probably get a better outcome for everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. Please rate our show on Apple Podcast and subscribe. Meanwhile, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Or you can subscribe to our newsletter at tallbergfoundation.org to learn more about our work. That's TALLBERG foundation.org. Thank you, and we'll be back again next week for another episode of Tallberg's New Thinking for a New World. This podcast was brought to you through the generous support of SNF, the Stavros Niarchos Foundation.